Well, not really sure how to start this video. I don't really have an intro, so I guess we'll just jump right into it. Once upon a time, far into the distant past, my friends, there lived a dragon king. His name was Nibelung. Folks, Nibelung was a bad man who loved crack and drugs, prayed to Satan, and loved all evil things. Yet despite this, Nibelung had a profound impact on Teyvat. For instance, it's possible Nibelung was in fact a primordial human, or his downfall led to the downfall of a primordial human, depending on how you interpret the sentence in the most recent world quest from Aksinya, which states, quote, "The Hyperboreans even attempted to forge his body from the flesh and blood of the primordial cryo-dragon, just to give him authority equal to the One, a will born alongside Teyvat, the master of the Light Realm's power at the very beginning, and the king of all dragon lords, Nibelung. Ever since his destruction, the place of primordial human, or Narayana, has sat vacant." Now, this statement is pretty ambiguous. It could mean Nibelung was a primordial human, and when he died, the seat of the primordial human was vacated, or it could mean Nibelung's destruction coincided with the downfall of the primordial human. It's difficult to tell, given Nibelung's destruction also destroyed half of Teyvat, so you know, it's easy to see how his destruction could lead to the downfall of an external primordial human. Now, as for what a primordial human is, we still don't know. Our first reference to primordial human comes from Graeae, in which he wrote, quote, "Lies beneath the great sea" is itself an interesting phrase. It comes from ancient Sumerian texts and should be read as Narayana, which also means primordial human. Unless I'm mistaken, the next reference I believe to primordial human would come from Malanta during the Temple of Space quest, in which he said, quote, "I once believed it was merely punishment for transgressions, but now I fear there is deeper meaning behind it, as it is with the heretical myth that light and darkness birthed the primordial human." Near to the end of the quest, we would ask Astoria about it, and he said, quote, "I'm not entirely sure what Malanta meant either. The first thing that came to mind was a parable once condemned as hearsay by the angels. It tells of the god of lights who created a body in its own likeness, only for it to be stolen away by the king of darkness. Thus, within that single body, the powers of lights and darkness began to contend with one another, and so the primordial human, bearing both, came to possess both good and evil." It's a lesser-known version of the primordial human myth. Now, folks, bear with me for what I'm about to say, as to some it could very well be considered blasphemy, but keep in mind what I'm about to say is deeply disturbing speculation. Astoria's story mentions beings who don't sound unfamiliar to us. Nibelung has been referred to as the Lord of Darkness and the Dragon Lord of Darkness, whilst the heavenly principles, as master of the Light Realm, can be said to be the god of light. As a matter of fact, in Greek mythology, Phanes is quite literally the god of light. Now, if this is the case, and Astoria's story is referencing these two beings, then it sounds to me like the myth that the angels, servants of the heavenly principles, wanted banished from the earth was one that spoke of the heavenly principles fashioning themselves a corporeal form, only for it to be stolen by Nibelung, and within that body the forces of the heavenly principles light, and the Dragon King Nibelung's black birthed a primordial human.
This, of course, is bullshit, for no other reason than I simply command it to be bullshit. Besides, Nibelung's time as the King of Darkness is associated with the downfall of the primordial human, not the birth of one. And besides, Askinya's next horrific line details the heavenly principles were fine throughout the ordeal. Quote, "Ever since his destruction, the place of primordial human, or Narayana, has sat vacant, but in the heavens above, the cold blades of the ruler who must not be named, or should I say the long nails of theirs, continued to hang high and pitiless over the world." Beautiful, I love to hear it. Anyway, following the death of the primordial human, the Hyperboreans, who were feeling suicidal, decided to create their own primordial human from the corpse of the deader-than-dead rotting cryo-sovereign. Naturally, they fucked it up terribly, and while we don't know the specifics of how they completely screwed the pooch,
The Cryo-Sovereign's corpse would blanket all the lands in unyielding holy soil of primordial ice that was so devastating it affected the ley lines in the entire region by turning them into crystal. Mankind's irrigation, folks. This act, among others, like being spurned on to rebellion by the alien voyager from afar whose name was revealed in this quest to be Anakarsis, would naturally result in this land of hilly-billy fucking inbred fucks getting blessed by that heaven-sent divine fucking nail. Anyway, 1,000 years later, the Belyi-Tsar would pop out of the Cryo-Sovereign. That's right, folks, the Belyi-Tsar was born from a failed experiment by the Hyperboreans to create a primordial human using the body of the Cryo-Sovereign. Regardless, the Belyi-Tsar was still down to become the primordial human, so much so, he willingly accepted becoming Cryo-Archon to see it through, writing in his diary, quotes, "Only by ascending to that seat high up in the court of the stars and accomplishing that grand undertaking which our forebears could not achieve can the possibility of total destruction be averted. My mind is made up. I shall accept the remains of the innocent along with the throne promised by the heavens, if only to ensure that the sacrifices of the survivors and the forgotten shall never be in vain." Right. Well, to this end, the Belyi-Tsar would often make trips into the Shadow Realm to learn more about the nation that had created him. Given the ruins of Hyperborea are in the Shadow Realm, which he states, by the way, the Shadow Realm was created by Anakarsis. Quote, "Why the abyss continues to seep into this world remains obscure, though it is my firm belief that it bears some relation to the very purpose for which the saint created the Shadow Realm. One day he'd find a little Hyperborean girl in stasis within a time capsule in the Shadow Realm, so he'd adopt her and her name would come to be known as Aksinya. The Belyi-Tsar would then create the Himvergameller Institute, which was focused on bioalchemy. The group had quite a host of characters. Most relevant to us is Aksinya, the adopted daughter of the Belyi-Tsar, Kosheki the Deathless, Pavlina, Grand Duchess of the Snegargorcha, and Alvin. At the Belyi-Tsar's request, the Institute's aims were to create a proto-human that would allow the Belyi-Tsar to become the primordial human so he could remake the world into one where no one ever suffers or some fucking evil shit. The group would succeed in making the proto-human by using parts of the body of the Belyi-Tsar, and as a result, said proto-human looked like a young Belyi-Tsar, and the body would rest in this egg. Anyway, the plan would face a slight hiccup when the Belyi-Tsar would die in the cataclysm, and word on the street was the new Cryo-Archon, a feller calling herself the Tsarista, was planning to ban alchemy nationwide, so the Everwinter Institute began to worry. Aksinya would soon upload the proto-human's consciousness into an ancient Hyperborean device and name the being the Eye of Graeae. She'd tell him he's gonna take the place of the Belyi-Tsar and become the primordial human and remake the world, and he ostensibly says, yeah, sure, fuck it, why not? Behind the scenes, however, the Eye of Graeae did not want to become the primordial human, so he'd convince Alvish, Kokechi, and Pavlina to betray Aksinya by tossing her ass into the Shadow Realm. In return, he'd allow those three to divide his body up and use his power for whatever they wanted. 500 years later, Aksinya would break free from the Shadow Realm and was dead set on rebuilding the Eye of Graeae's body to keep the primordial human dream alive. So prior to the start of the game, she'd track down Alvis, butcher his ass, and take back a piece of Graeae's body. The world quest sees us track down the other two pieces of his body. Kosheki the Deathless would use, a piece of Graeae's body to create some weird fucking tree cult in the forest where everyone becomes immortal trees with some sort of hive mind or some shit. We don't actually do much to stop it. Hell, we even let a child consent to the procedure and join the tree hive mind. All we did was nab the body part, which meant no one else in the future could join, but, all the people who were sort of tricked into joining or just sort of stuck there. The final piece of Graeae's body was with Pavlina, who would use her piece of the body to create a being named Icor, who looked identical to the proto-human, which means this is how the young Belyi-Tsar looked. She would do a mutually consenting, because Icor consented to this centuries-long ritual to give her people, the Snegovich, souls. So, because they didn't have any souls, and she wanted to give her people souls so they could feel love. Yep, that was it. So we butchered her ass and took back a piece of the body. Oh, man, the standards here are nuts. Anyway, with Graeae whole again, Aksinya would take him from us and upload his mind into the still living, well, the body of the Belyi-Tsar was living, but his mind obviously wasn't in there. Anyway, she would upload Graeae's mind into the body of the Belyi-Tsar, and boom! There's a primordial human right there. Despite not initially wanting to be a primordial human because his birth as a transcendent one would spell doom for the rest of the world, Graeae at this point says, well, now I'm here, so let's... I mean, so we fight Aksinya, fight the Primordial Human in the Shadow Realm, defeat them both, trap their ass down a fucking infinitely long falling hole where Aksinya sort of just, admits, maybe the other three were right. Anyway, that's the quest, bye.